Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Is the end near for North Carolina's Earned Income Tax Credit? Changes are made to the Energy Jobs Bill, and it has both sides watching. And too young to tan. Some lawmakers say teenage tanning is causing cancer. Hello, I'm Kelly McCullen. Thanks so much for watching. The House voted to change state tax rules this week. Most notably, this legislation would ensure the state's Earned Income Tax Credit ends as scheduled in an old state budget bill. Legislative Republicans say they are poised to allow the state's Earned Income Tax Credit to expire.
All those in favor will vote aye.
The Democrats passed that tax credit in 2007 when it wrote the budget, and they gave the program an expiration date of January 1st, 2013.
Folks, our economy is sick and the medicine is bitter, but our goal is to make the patient well. And for too long, we've used our tax code to implement social policy as opposed to using the tax code to promote economic growth.
The state Earned Income Tax Credit allowed the working poor to receive tax refund checks, sometimes larger than the amount of state taxes they may have paid that year. Democrats say this tax credit program should continue, regardless of what former Democratic budget writers did to sunset the program.
It is a matter of great concern, and it is something that working families see our values here, and they see that we're not really working in their best interest.
But Republicans say this Earned Income Tax Credit program was running a 30% fraud rate. They also say the working poor has benefited from Republican efforts to lower sales taxes, a tax all consumers pay.
We removed the so-called temporary increase in the sales tax. That's $1.4 billion back to small businesses, and that helps disproportionately those who are lower income.
The bill moves to the Senate, where it must pass before reaching Governor McCrory's desk. The Senate Commerce Committee weighed an energy exploration bill that will greenlight fracking and oil drilling in North Carolina. The legislation has been modified as these weeks have progressed and requires a fresh look in this report. The Senate Commerce Committee discussed the bill that would release a new energy exploration industry into North Carolina's economy. This legislation is changing as it's moving through committee and as lawmakers debate. And in that time of possible change, supporters and opponents of energy exploration are trying to bend legislative ears.
Let's get North Carolina in the energy business. Senate Bill 76 wisely pushes for energy jobs both onshore and offshore, but more important, Senate Bill 76 is about North Carolina becoming a part of the U.S. energy turnaround. The newer version of Senate Bill 76 would lift the state's drilling and fracking ban beginning in March 2015. Current state law would require a separate bill be passed to authorize drilling permits. Senate Bill 76 would also allow wastewater from fracking operations to be injected underground for permanent storage.
Fracking wastewater contains carcinogens. It also contains naturally occurring radioactive materials. It's been linked to earthquakes in other states, and it also could contaminate our drinking water supplies.
Supporters say fracking and offshore oil drilling can be conducted safely in North Carolina. They'll also say that any final state regulations will be state-of-the-art and in line with other states that have mature energy industries.
We are committed to helping communities where we conduct our operations understand the proven scientific safeguards and vigilant regulatory oversight that helps to ensure that natural gas continues to be produced in harmony with the local environment.
Opponents say they may not stop fracking and drilling, but they hope state lawmakers will slow the process down and allow the studies to be completed. They say rules are still being written under an October 14th deadline. And with that in mind, there's no reason permits should be issued beginning March 2015.
Many of the jobs that you talked about in 2015, that's kind of a long ways away, and people need jobs in North Carolina right now, not 2015. I Googled hydraulic fracturing before coming to this committee meeting, and there's no out-of-work frackers in North Carolina.
Wilson County Senator Buck Newton is running this bill on fracking, changing a bit as it goes through the process. And I've read the blogs like you have, and they say that what you're doing is speeding up the idea of letting people drill and frack in North Carolina. And I saw you and you were bristling about that.
Well, this bill is about jobs. North Carolina needs it. I mean, my district's got 12% unemployment, and there's lots of areas around the state that have high unemployment, and that's what this bill is all about. We're not speeding up the timeline. That's just factually incorrect. Those that oppose drilling and exploration and development of shale gas, really their only defense now is to try to delay it. And so really what this is about is trying to set a time certain when this industry can begin to move forward in North Carolina. It's a multi-year process. It takes a lot of time and a lot of investment. And so the industry needs to know when is it that they're going to be able to start. The rules and regulations are by law required to be finished by October of 2014. And the big part of this bill, which you've just identified, is that we're saying in March 2015 is when they'll be able to start applying for permits.
You want to make that clear statement that energy companies are welcome in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
For the North Carolinians who have lived here, because these exploration companies are not here yet,
Right.
how do they know they're getting a fair shake when they hear that this is about the jobs, which they want? They also don't want to look at YouTube and see a video of the fellow lighting his well water either. So you know where the balance is. How do you assure us that if we let you drill and we get rich, we can still have a good environment?
I understand. This is part of what's missing in the debate is sometimes the facts get lost in the argument. And if North Carolinians look at other states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the Dakotas, Oklahoma, Texas, and they see the economies that are going on there that are primarily, in large part, being driven by shale gas exploration. We have a lot of people don't realize we have very abundant resources here in North Carolina. They need more exploration. That's what we want those companies to come and risk their dollars. They spend millions of dollars just exploring to see if they can find it, and how to bring it out of the ground the way it's supposed to be. The industry wants to be regulated. They like to have a very predictable, clean process, and that's what we're trying to give them, so that they know that even though they've never been to North Carolina before, when they could go back to Texas or they could go to the Dakotas where they already know what they're dealing with, that North Carolina is an attractive place for them to come, and we want them here.
Is the legislature to be the petroleum industry's friend in this, or to be an overseer?
Well, my personal view is that our government should be a conduit to make sure that the environment, and I mean the working environment, the economic environment, is favorable towards job creation and economic development. At the same time, it has to balance its responsibilities for keeping a clean environment, protecting our workers, having a good, safe workplace. And it's a balancing act. But our government should not be contrarian or in opposition to. It should be trying to work with to find the happy medium where we can have our economy moving forward and not always trying to say no. We find the way to get it done. I mean, that's what most people do in their daily lives is, how do we solve this problem? And the problem is, how do we grow our economy and still maintain our environment and the duties that we need to do? So the governor's bringing that kind of approach, as he calls it, a customer service-oriented attitude. I think that's the way we need to be. How do we solve the problem? This is being done successfully, very successfully, in at least 18 other states right here. They've been going on for decades. There's no reason why North Carolina can't do the same thing. We ought to be doing it better than anybody else.
Senator Buck Newton, appreciate it.
Thank you.
The House and Senate will negotiate a final bill to settle North Carolina's options for expanding Medicaid while operating a state health insurance exchange. Republican leaders have said they do not trust the federal government's promise to financially assist states that expand Medicaid. They also agree the state does not have the technology in place to operate a health insurance exchange. This bill would keep the state out of both federal health care programs. A negotiated compromise on the bill's technical language will require reapproval by both the House and the Senate. State lawmakers seem to tighten up anti-crystal meth laws each session, and this week the House approved tougher sanctions for meth producers who get caught possessing pseudoephedrine-based cold medicines. Republican sponsors of tougher crystal meth penalties say there are 15 branded legal cold medicines that contain pseudoephedrine. Customers must show identification and sign to purchase these drugs from behind the counter. This new legislation would make it a felony for people convicted of producing crystal meth from ever possessing these cold medicines.
As you all know, pseudoephedrine is the only ingredient you have to have in order to make methamphetamine. So if someone that's been making meth has pseudoephedrine on them, there's pretty good reason to believe that they have no good purpose.
This new round of crystal meth legislation targets that single ingredient. Crystal meth producers extract pseudoephedrine from cold medicine as its meth's key ingredient. Bill sponsors say ordinary people suffering from bad colds would never be inconvenienced under this proposal.
If we don't cut off their supply of the one ingredient they have to make this drug, then it's very difficult to slow them down. And this simply, it doesn't affect anybody except those who are in the business of manufacturing methamphetamine.
The bill has bipartisan support, but some questions were raised about charging someone with a felony for buying a certain cold medicine, especially after they've served their sentences.
You may not know all the drugs that contain, all the medications that you can purchase, by signing for it. You don't know all of them, and you just may happen to end up with it.
While the focus is on preventing meth convicts from getting access to pseudoephedrine, the bill also increases sentences for meth makers who ply their trade around minors, seniors, and the disabled. Governor Pat McCrory offered his State of the State address this week. He covered tax reform, education, and government efficiency in his near 45-minute speech. Governor Pat McCrory's State of the State address revealed an outline, or his marching orders to the new administration.
Our administration is going to focus all of their time on three key functions: our economy, our education, and the efficiency of our services.
The governor claims success in signing legislation that creates new high school diplomas for students seeking vocational training, university studies, or both.
I have strongly advocated for two pathways to success in our high schools: vocational and higher college education. I firmly believe in this. There are two pathways to success.
The governor offered a tax reform direction, but no fine details of how to change the state's income tax system.
Lower rates on personal income and businesses to be more competitive, at least with our next-door neighbors. Close loopholes for special interests to make our system more fair and transparent. It must be revenue neutral. We must implement this plan systematically and strategically to ensure that we don't put at risk business confidence or crucial revenue needed for services to our citizens.
The governor called for changing state personnel laws to allow rewards for efficient government workers and a pathway to get rid of lazy ones.
We want to reward our talented state employees, but seat warmers must be a thing of the past.
House Democratic leader Representative Larry Hall offered the Democratic perspective. He seized on Governor McCrory's call for tax reform.
We cannot support any tax reform plan that doesn't pass a simple fairness test. Governor McCrory's plan would expand the sales tax to include more services like haircuts, home maintenance, and doctor's visits, while cutting income taxes for the wealthiest individuals and big corporations.
The Democrats say Republican calls for, quote, education reform should not really be code language for funding cuts.
Cutting funding for public education is wrong because it hurts our children's ability to succeed and compete for the jobs of the future.
With the governor's broad agenda now released, legislative Republicans seem receptive, with Democrats promising their own legislation reflecting Democratic values. Stephanie Jaco is a reporter for News Radio 680 WPTF in Raleigh. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Welcome to Leg Week. Well, you saw the State of the State. What struck you about it?
Well, I think we heard a lot of themes that the governor has used before. He talked about education, of course, his emphasis on vocational education, efficiency in government, customer service, which is something we've heard a lot, and also the economy, of course, talking about jobs and how to bring those into North Carolina.
Yeah, every State of the State since I've been here has been about education, jobs, roads, it's sort of same topics, but Never heard much talk about customer service. What did he say about that?
Well, it's interesting. I think this kind of shows the governor's corporate background. We're hearing a lot of words that are really out of the business world. You know, customer service, making the government friendlier to taxpayers. Also branding, that's a word that we don't hear a lot in the public sector. But he talked a lot about branding North Carolina, about giving it an identity different from South Carolina, Virginia, making it attractive for people to come here. So words that we really hear a lot in the business world.
What is it about the environment and personality of North Carolina that makes it so different from driving across to Tennessee or down to South Carolina?
Well, I think the idea will be at the end of this legislative session that we have lower taxes, right? Personal and corporate income taxes. We have some reform in our incentives packages and just generally reasons why businesses would want to locate here. So get that economy going and get some people working.
What do you make of his comments? Because they've ended up being controversial by talking about state workers, which I'm a state worker, but seat warmers better be put on notice. They want to change personnel laws to get rid of certain people. I don't hear that very often in the state of the state. What do you make of that?
He didn't mention your name, so that's a good thing.
Good.
I think we're hearing a lot about the efficiency of government, and I think that's part of this. You know, he's talked a lot in particular about the Health and Human Services Department and problems there, some pretty scathing audits that have turned up overspending, overtime that wasn't authorized. And so I think that has a lot to do with what he's talking about. I think he wants to really shake things up and make sure that we're running leanly and efficiently.
The military got a standing ovation. I didn't think would ever end.
Well, there were a lot of standing ovations. Republicans, of course, who run the legislature, have been waiting about 20 years to have a Republican get up and talk. Of course, that's important. We have the third largest military footprint in the state, so certainly crucial, and with potential cuts coming up, something that he wants to talk about. It was interesting, he talked as well about the defense contracting industry and growing that. Certainly that could be an important part of the economy here.
How well did that speech fit in with what you're seeing the Senate and House leadership in their direction they're taking the state in 2013?
I think we've seen them on the same page so far. We're early in the session, just a couple of weeks, and of course the governor's only 6 weeks into his term. But I think we're seeing a lot of things that are similar between their ideologies. Of course, the unemployment bill deciding to lower benefits, the decision not to expand Medicaid to another 500,000 North Carolinians. So definitely some similarities there, bills that the governor will sign. But I think we're also going to see some battles coming up that will sort of decide what that difference is, if there is one, on tax reform and issues like that.
The buzz slogan of this session is about the jobs bill. We got to get more jobs in North Carolina. He talked about tax reform as part of that package. Did you see details in what the governor said, or do you see that he's willing to talk about tax reform, but we'll let the legislature determine the final result?
I think there are a lot of ideas floating around out there, and personally, as someone who has been a press secretary in the political world, I would say, why give details, right? I mean, this is just something that people are going to crunch the numbers, they're going to look at your policy recommendations and say, this won't work, this isn't right. So personally, I would say it might be a good idea to just paint a broad picture of what you want to do with your administration, as opposed to handing out some facts and figures that people may use to hang around your neck later.
Yeah, but people out there in North Carolina, when they see a politician on TV, they want to see specifics, and they complain about it. You're too vague. You're not going to keep your word, whatever your word is. Why wouldn't he go there? He had a friendly crowd there, minus about 50 Democrats in both chambers.
Right, and of course the Democrats were critical that he didn't lay out details and specifics. You know, I think it just goes back to wanting to spell out a broad vision, a big picture. You know, he used 45 minutes, but of course that's not a lot of time if you want to get into the nuts and bolts about how you want to fix education, tighten up the government, and also bring jobs to the state. I think maybe some of it is just an issue of how much time do we have to get into all of that as well.
Stephanie Hawka, News Radio 680 WPTF, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
A House Health Committee is debating whether minors should be banned from using tanning beds. Lawmakers must weigh doctors and anti-cancer advocates' claims against tanning industry reports and lobbyists who say melanoma cases are rising, but not among people who use tanning salons. House Bill 18 would change the state's tanning bed age limit. Right now, children under 14 are banned from using tanning beds, but this new legislation would raise that age limit, preventing anyone under 18 years old from using tanning bed equipment.
Incidence of skin cancer is increasing. Radiation is cumulative over your lifetime. The earlier the exposure, the higher the risk of developing skin cancer.
The House Health and Human Services Committee heard from doctors and melanoma patient advocates. They tried persuading lawmakers that tanning beds cause cancer.
In this past week, 2 women that I was connected with both lost their battle with melanoma. They were both in their early 30s. They both leave behind small families, and they both had a tanning bed history.
Joseph Levy represents the American Sun Tanning Association. In his testimony, he challenged the anti-teen tanning philosophy.
melanoma is increasing most commonly in older men, not in younger women. And I will share that with you from the National Cancer Institute and anybody who is studying this in earnest.
The House Health and Human Services Committee delayed a vote on House Bill 18. They say they want to hear more about tanning, the science, medicine, and then determine whether teens under 18 belong in tanning beds. The House Rules Committee approves a clarification of our state's indecent exposure law. Some Asheville residents were angered by a political rally supporting a woman's, quote, right to go topless in public. State lawmakers say their local authorities were not sure if a woman's display of her bare breasts in public is actually indecent.
I talked to law enforcement who were unclear in my county. I came down here, we researched it and found that indeed it is a hazy, kind of murky area.
Bill sponsors say they're not pushing for a new crime or any new punishment, simply assuring police that bare-breasted women can't parade in public. State education officials address lawmakers on how our public schools are teaching a portion of U.S. history. Teachers must teach the United States founding principles. These are concepts you find in early American political documents like the Bill of Rights and including Judeo-Christian influences in the country's founding. There are some questions about political influences by modern-day legislators in our classrooms. State Superintendent of Public Instruction June Atkinson, you were up before the senators on that committee asking about this Founding Principles Act. Why do they care so much about one particular topic being U.S. History 1 in high school?
Well, number one, the mission of public education is to prepare students to be citizens, to be career and college ready. And there has been interest about what we are teaching our students about the founding principles and our founding fathers. So there is a lot of interest in that subject.
Not to I'll put you on the spot, but founding principles in terms of what? There's a lot of principles out there that America runs on.
Well, the founding principles include the inalienable rights of each person, personal responsibility, the role of government. It also includes due process and the rule of law. There are about 10 principles that are a part of our curriculum now as it relates to teaching about the founding principles on which our nation is founded.
When it comes to talking with politicians about political principles, you know where this goes, left and right and center and all stages in between. But how much of a principle can be hard fact in your opinion versus it reflects the leadership of a state at any given point in history?
Well, of course, we are in an area where there's a lot of gray area about how you would interpret the founding principles. What we want to do with our American history founding principles number one is to give students that background and help them work through some thorny issues that we see every day in the newspaper, where we see debate in the General Assembly and in Congress.
You get into the Bill of Rights and First Amendment, Second Amendment, and such as that.
A part of the founding principle legislation is to teach the Bill of Rights, to teach about documents such as the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers.
Now, I can see a fair number of public school teachers seeing you give a speech before state legislators and they go, oh boy, are they telling me what I have to teach? So how do you localize this down at the school level so one teacher can teach how he or she feels?
Well, we've had as a part of our standards for decades the founding principles and the Federalist Papers. So this is a renewal or a revival, so to speak, to make sure that we have that emphasis. What we try to do with our teachers is to provide professional development, to give them the tools and resources so that they can pick and choose those things that will help them teach the standards about the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, rule of law, and the other components of the Founding Fathers.
Are you studying politics circa 1776 through about 1800, or do you take it from independence up through the 19th century after the Civil War?
Well, the State Board of Education passed a policy that beginning with the 9th graders of this year, 2012, that a student would have to take American History, Founding Principles 1 for a year, and then American History 2. The first segment includes from the founding of our nation through Reconstruction, and then the second year of history starts with Reconstruction and goes through present day.
What was missing from the curriculum out there in public schools that this had to be mandated on to the schools?
Well, For a long time, we have been responsible in the Department of Public Instruction to develop the standards for all teachers to use. This gives a greater level of specificity as to what should be taught. So we are going from the standards, the big standards, the conceptual standards, to objectives. And so there is greater specificity as to what teachers will include in that first year of American history.
Is there any fear that someone will teach this incorrectly and you'll raise the ire of an education committee in either the House and Senate?
Well, there's always that danger because all of us have our own interpretation of the Bill of Rights and the founding principles, but it certainly does call for a good debate.
State Superintendent June Atkinson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Governor Pat McCrory signed the high school diploma bill this week. Future high school students will earn seals, proving they are ready for advanced vocational training or geared towards university studies. Students can earn both seals beginning later this decade. The House Rules Committee heard testimony on legalizing medical marijuana and then voted promptly to kill the bill. The quick vote and a quick adjournment allowed lawmakers to leave out the back door, leaving pro and anti-cannabis advocates to square off in the committee room.
People have already got in their mind what they want to think, and they're not going to change it. Nobody has really studied this stuff. Everybody around that table up there haven't really gotten studied it really. What's out there now, all they're doing is what that guy did, was read what the government said. I've been hearing that for 10 years, same paper.
No committee members debated the bill. That's our show this week. Find us online on Facebook, facebook.com/legweek. We love tweeting and following Twitter. Our name is @legweekinreview. And our email address, should you have some comments, legweek@unctv.org. Hope you'll jot us a note. We'll see you next week.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.